Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
Here's a quote from one of my former pastors that I heard, and when I heard it, like it blew me away. And the quote is, "Life moves at the speed of our relationships."
Hmm.
You know, you think about it, those people that are doing great things have great relationships. Those people that are not doing so great, they probably need better relationships.
Hmm.
And the component that helps those relationships is the effective conversation within those relationships, because you learn and grow together, right? Which gives you consistency over time, which allows that relationship to be great.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Gryn, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed author, speaker, and educator Chip Baker. We discussed all about learning to serve and inspire others through relationships. We also talked about his book, The Impact of Influence, and how you can apply this to your life, along with his formula chart for life, effective conversations to ignite relationships, growing through your go, and his one tip to get your body or mind back to what it once was. Really enjoyed my interview with Chip. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. And I have Chip Baker, author, speaker, and educator. Welcome to the show, Chip.
Thanks so much for having me. Been looking forward to this.
Thanks for coming on. And the Success Chronicles is your podcast, and definitely check that out. When did you start that podcast?
Oh man, it's been 8 years since I started the podcast and the YouTube channel. So it's been a great run, and I'm truly grateful for the growth that it's had over the years.
Yeah, 8 years. Wow, that's a long run. I thought I've been doing it for a while. I'm only on like 2.5 years right now. So
Yeah, it's been neat to see the journey from the first few episodes to now. I don't know. Can't even look at them. It's like the difference.
yeah, I know. Like you look at yourself, like, well, for you
Like,
8 years ago, you're like, wow, how did I do that? Right?
yeah, quality, all of that, man. It's crazy. Technology.
Yeah, you learn, you grow, right?
Hmm.
What would you say? The biggest thing you learned over the last, you started your podcast 8 years ago. I mean, that's when podcasting wasn't even going too much. I
Yeah,
mean, what's the biggest things you've learned through the years?
I think the cool thing is that with technology like this, it makes the world smaller. And I think
Mm.
I've learned that like there's no limits to what we can achieve. Because I think it allows us to be connected. I mean, it's crazy. Like it's people that I've seen on TV or hear on the radio or something like that, and I reach out via social media to
Mm-hmm.
interview, and like in a week I'm interviewing them. Like just things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so it
Mm-hmm.
just shows I've learned that like really there is no limit. If you're willing to put in the work and be open and to learn, then anything can happen for you.
Yeah, it's a great point. I like what you said. Like it makes it feel like the world's smaller to some
Yeah.
degree because you can, like the people that you see and that's social media. Obviously has its pros and cons, but
Oh, for sure.
the fact that you can reach out, and I feel the same way. I've talked to people on my
Yeah.
podcast, PJ Tour players, and people
Yeah.
that I don't think I would have ever even had any contact with if I never started mine.
Hmm.
So yeah, the outreach and the growth that you can get from just these individuals that you'd think you would never actually have conversations with.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
So what would you say? So people listen, and this is mainly we talk about health and wellness, and today this definitely can go hand in hand with building a sound body and mind. But what
Hmm.
would you say the biggest things that you educate people on and speak about through your work?
I think for me, first off, I don't think that we can speak or teach people things that we haven't experienced, right? That's not genuine in my eyes. But so for me, I'm all about sharing the experiences, the learning lessons that we've learned in our life, to share those with others and to show them that the big man has blessed all of us with uh, amazing gifts to influence others, just like people have influenced me, and it's made a huge impact in my life. And so, I think that like you, like me, like little me,
Hmm.
like no, like yes, you. We
Hmm.
all have a certain special gift or trait that we can use to help others. I think it's important that we tap into that and maximize our potential.
Yeah, love that. And you have a book called The Impact of Influence.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just curious, what kind of wisdom is in that book? I mean, obviously, just try to give us maybe the cliff notes of what was your reasoning behind this book.
Well, I think first, the reasoning behind it was the ability to be connected with great people that can help teach me how to do that, first off, right? Through the podcasting, through the connecting, I met some great people that I was able to learn from. And then the next phase of that is, we've all been influenced by something or someone in our life, and we've been influenced in such a manner that it's impacted us and caused us to be the people that we are
Hmm.
today. All right. And so that's the gist of what the book, and it's a book series. We just recently released volume 5, The Impact of Influence. And it really is powerful influencers that have come together, and they're just sharing their stories of, that person or a situation that's influenced them in their life, what they learned from that, and then how they're using what they learned to help others and help our world be better. And that's basically the gist of the impact of influence.
Yeah, and that made me think like I coach high school golf, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
when I think about, I'm like 7 years now, when I think about, when I'm with these kids, is like, how can I be, how can I influence their lives
Yeah.
and be something that they can, grow to like learn from the things that, I've learned from for the past 20, 30 years that I've been,
Mhm.
well, I'm older than that, but for, at least, my adult age, and just help build good character.
Yes. And what's crazy is those are transferable skills. Like as a kid, you don't know that. Like we don't realize that.
Right.
We're learning transferable skills, but those transferable skills that you learn at that age, you're able to take those and use those for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but like, discipline, being on time, hard work,
Hmm.
teamwork, grit, all of those different things that we learn. um I still use all of that as an adult with a family and a job and a career, and all of those different things. But it's simple. All the stuff that I learned then, it's the same stuff that I do now.
Hmm. Yeah, and kids, it's like they're like sponges too. It's
Yeah.
like so it is a very gratifying,
Oh my
I guess,
gosh,
position
yes.
to be in, because I can remember people that have influenced my life when I was in high school, and the the teachers, and how I still think of things that
Yes.
happened from when I was 15.
Yes.
Now you have this formula. I was curious about this formula chart for life.
Mhm.
Yeah. I thought this was, I'm curious to know what this is all about, the formula chart for life. Perhaps how can people apply this?
So the formula chart for life, I got a little story, the background story about that.
Yeah.
So growing up, I always struggled with math. All right. Even, when I got into college, the math classes that I had to take, I took
Hmm.
the bare minimum of what I had to take. And I don't know that I completely passed those. They probably helped me because they were so tired of me like asking questions and man,
Right.
here he comes again. Like, gosh, just to get rid of me. But either way, I took it and I ran with it. I'm grateful for it. But then when I got into my career, I saw that there's this thing that we use in math called a formula chart. And I co-taught a chemistry class. In the chemistry class, they did formulas, and They use the formula chart.
Mm.
And so as I was looking through those things, I was like, man, like this can be applied. Some of these things can be applied to life.
Mm.
And so I started taking notes on that and just, observing. And that's basically what the book is. The book is the formula chart for life. And it just shares formulas for life lessons. And
Love that.
man,
Yeah.
it's really like no writing, it's all formulas.
Hmm.
And it's amazing because the beauty of it is you can take the formula and apply it to your life and your personal situation to help you be successful.
Yeah, I love that. I think, um, yeah, anything that's like simplify things, and like formulas can
Mm-hmm.
sort of simplify things to some degree. Uh, and then you talk about like effective conversations,
Mm-hmm.
in relationships. I mean, this is topics that we don't necessarily talk a lot about on this podcast, but I'm just curious, and I think it's important. I think we've lost touch a little bit with effective conversations, probably due to what's happened over the last few years with COVID,
COVID,
and
yeah.
everyone's sort of in their own little bubble, especially with kids, and how, even just wearing masks, how that could affect communication between kids and adults and kids and kids. What kind of things do you talk about regarding building effective conversation within individuals?
I think when you look at effective conversation, the underlying piece is the respect aspect. You want to make sure in relationships that you're respectful of the other person, you're respectful of yourself. There's lots that go into that. And here's a quote from one of my former pastors that I heard, and when I heard it, like it blew me away. And the quote is, "Life moves at the speed of our relationships."
Hmm.
You know, you think about it, those people that are doing great things have great relationships. Those people that are not doing so great, they probably need better relationships.
Hmm.
And the component that helps those relationships is the effective conversation within those relationships, because you learn and grow together, right? Which gives you consistency over time, which allows that relationship to be great. And so, just things like respecting one another, allowing time for growth. There's a couple, like a tip that is a rating scale that I have in that book, the effective conversation to ignite relationships. Whereas, and this can be applied in, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, co-worker,
Hmm.
male friend to male, any type of relationship, a rating scale. So the scale is, one is, it's not an issue, but 10 is like, hey, don't do that crap. you know and so when
Hmm.
you have this scale, so I can say, hey, Brian, man, that's a that's a 3 for me, and you can say simply, hey, Chip, that's a 9 for me. So now, just from that situation, now, okay, man, now I can see, well, it's a 9 for him, so that bothers him. So what can I do to help make it not as stressful to you? So just in that right there, that shows you the effort that I care about how you feel about the situation,
Hmm.
right? Which automatically brings us closer together, because now you see, oh, well, he does care that things are all right. And so that's just one of the tips that are in the book, the rating scale that's really good, which allows for effective conversation in relationships.
And I also would think that like prioritizing
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing your
Yeah.
that prioritizing those relationships is got to be up there, right? Because if you don't prioritize it, you won't make time to have those effective conversations. Like I can say, like growing up with my dad, would we would uh like book out these times where we would actually just sit and talk.
Mm.
And it could be a 5-10 minute talk, it could be an hour
That's so
talk.
good.
We started
That's
doing
so good.
Yeah, we started doing it every week. Now not as much. He's in Florida, I'm here. It's not like, but like probably for a span of, I'd say, a good 5 years, 6 years. And it's amazing. I started doing it with him, and it's amazing how much I learned from him, but he actually learned a lot from me as well.
Mhm.
And it just sort of grew that relationship.
And about you too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and topics came up and some were, more surface level, but some were deeper. And I think that's sort of the issue. I think a lot of times today is that we have so many of these surface level conversations and we never
Yes.
really get down to,
Yes.
what is really important. There's nothing wrong with surface level conversations, but I think with your closest ones, I think it's important to make time maybe to talk about other things.
Yeah, those hard conversations are where you have your maximum growth.
Yeah. And so, with that, like, what would you say are some tips as far as, building, I don't know, building relationships, with other individuals, whether it's coworkers or, family members. What kind of like tips would you give individuals to start building these effective, conversations, to ignite these relationships?
I think a lot of the things we've hit on, I think first, having the respect piece, respecting the other person, but then respecting yourself to have boundaries to be able to express hey, those are kind of my boundaries. That's something that makes me unhappy, which sparks the conversation. I think allowing time for growth, when you express things that are not so well for you, you can't expect for it to just boom, just magically disappear, right?
Mm.
And so you have to allow that time for growth so you meet, halfway in between there. I think have a system for communicating, like you said, make the time, we're going to take time to do this. We have a window where we talk, have a scale, have a system by which you communicate, right?
Mhm.
And if you can plan that and be proactive beforehand, it allows you to not be reactive. And being reactive is not good.
Right.
Proactive is better, you know. And I think that those are some of the common things that initially come up for me when you're striving to be better in relationships.
And something that I was just thinking about was like I had this talk with Colin Stuckert, who's a CEO of a supplement company, but
Mm-hmm.
we were just talking about building community, but having relationships that serve you well. And you think about like health and wellness, surrounding
Mm-hmm.
yourself with people who are prioritizing their health and taking actions within that, whether that's going to a gym or eating the right way. And if you can surround yourself
Mm-hmm.
with more people that are like that, that will automatically have an influence on you. It That's something I just think that's I've been lucky to be around a lot of people who have put health first,
Yeah.
since I was been in high school and then in college. I surrounded myself with people like that, but I just think that's important as well.
Oh, without a doubt. The sum total, of the five most people, the people we hang around most. That quote.
Hmm.
And it does make a difference who you put yourself around, and it's a choice to do that. But you have to be disciplined to make those choices to put yourself around the right people, and then from there you have that positive peer pressure, right? It's not, hey,
Yeah,
let's go do
right.
bad things. Hey, let's go to the gym. Okay. you
Hmm.
know, hey, we're not gonna eat all of that. Let's go to let's have a healthier food choice. Oh, okay. And so it's that situation to where uh you've been disciplined enough to make the choices to put yourself around the right people that make good choices, and therefore those choices multiply because we're all making good choices and we all get better together.
Yeah. And then I noticed you have another sort of, I think it might be an ebook, growing through your go through.
Come on.
Growing through your go through. So
Yes,
explain
sir.
that one to me.
So I don't care who you are. None of us are immune uh, from growing through tough things. Catch that. None of us are immune from growing through tough things. And what I mean by that is like, you know, crazy things are going to happen in our life, right? But what we have to do is in those situations, we have to be aware enough to where we learn the lessons. Hey, the stove is hot. Don't touch the hot stove. Like those kind of things. I did this. Ooh, that was not, I didn't get a good result on that. I made this choice to do this. Oh, that was pretty beneficial for me. Right. And so we have to make sure that we grow through those situations so that on the other side of that, we are better and we are the best versions of ourselves. And this is where it gets really good. Um, yes, you become better when you do that, but check this out. You become better for others as well, right? Which allows you to do more and be more, and make more of an impact in our world.
Yeah, I like that. And what are some of the things that you've learned or you've gone through that you've grown from, both in business and just everyday life?
Yeah, I'm the evidence and the research of that, man. Pick something, just growing up, was raised with a single parent mom, grew up in a small town, all of those things, had some struggles. We had financial struggles, like all of those things that I could say, hey, those are excuses, but I've chose to use those as my motivation to say, hey, we're gonna learn from that, and we ain't doing that no more.
Yeah.
you know and so any of those situations in life that we have to grow through that are adverse situations, we can all make excuses and whine and say poor me, and say why me, but why don't we just say why not me? you know
Right,
and
right.
so all of those things, and then even like into my life, there's, man, like, struggle like in college, playing ball, things quite didn't go the way I wanted them to go. Getting out of college, it took me 3 years to pass my certification test to be an educator, but I ended up being teacher of the year twice, on my campus. What if I had given up? What if I had chosen not to do those things? And so as I go through each thing, reflect and think of each phase of my life, there's tons of things that I've had to grow through, right? And so, like I said, when we started, um, when you push yourself through that and learn those lessons, it allows you to be the best version of yourself. So now, there's a guy that I work with that has had some issues with, passing the certification test, and I can encourage him because I've been there. You
Right.
know, there are kids, that I teach or coach that may have are raised by single parent in a tough situation. Like I know the pain, I can see. You don't have to tell me. I know, I can see it, and I know what it feels like, right? So now I can encourage them and say, hey, let me tell you, like if I can do it, some of these things that I've been blessed to do, no, trust me, you can too. Right. And so we all have to make sure that we grow through our go through, because at the end of the day, it's bigger than us.
Yeah, and I just think of like some individuals that I work with, like clients that are going through struggles. Most of the time, I deal with people who are going through struggles with weight and some
Mm-hmm.
health um, but I always go back to just focusing on the process and not
Yes.
getting, too caught up in the result.
Yeah.
Because doing something every day, creating good habits, you might not see a result in a week, you might not see a result in a
Mm-hmm.
month, but a
Yeah.
lot of people don't wait long enough, right? Like before it starts getting good, it's like, oh, they end up giving up. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times you sort of have to just keep pushing through, and you'll come out better on the at the end.
For sure. I think as I heard you say that, I think the word that comes up for me is consistency.
Hmm.
So it's important to just be consistent.
Right.
Show up, have a great attitude, give everything you got today.
Yeah.
Then reflect in the evening, then hit the ground running. Show up, have a great attitude, give everything you got the next day. And
Exactly.
just continue to do that daily. I mean, you do that for a week, that's a great week. You do that for a month, ooh, that's a good month. You do that for a year, oh man, it's a good year. You see where I'm going. It continues to build. And, when you get to go visit the big man, you would not have just left a legacy. It will have allowed you to live a legacy by your day-to-day actions, because you just showed up, had a great attitude, and gave your all, which gives you that consistency daily.
Love that. Well, this was good, Chip. I think we've hit on a lot of things. Where's the best place for people to find you?
So all of my social media is at Chip Baker TSC, as in the Success Chronicles, except for Twitter, and Twitter is Chip Baker 19. And so all of my social media is that. I ask that you would go check it out. If you see something that you like, that speaks to you, and there's somebody that you think of course, the typical like, follow, subscribe, all of that stuff. That's fine. But I think it's bigger than that. Share it with someone that you care about in hopes to make their day better.
Yeah, and I'll definitely put some links in the show notes for people to find you, Chip. And you're out in the Houston area, right?
Yes, sir. I am in Conroe, Texas, which is north of Houston.
Outstanding. Well, I'll ask you one last question.
Okay.
What tip would you give someone who's maybe struggling in it could be in weight, it could be in other areas of their lives, to sort of get back to where they maybe once were 10, 15 years ago, either their body, their mind? What one tip would you give that individual?
I think going back to the formulas, how we talked about, I think maximum effort equals maximum results, right? Let me say that again. Maximum effort equals maximum results. And so it's important to make sure that you're open and willing to put the work in and be consistent, like we talked about. Yeah. And then, that process is tough. Tough people do tough stuff, right? But then on the other side of that, you will love the results of what you get, because you put the work in, you put the effort. And like you said earlier, it's not so much about the results. It's more about the process, right? And in that process, you gain mental toughness. Like, you prove to yourself that you can do it, right? Which really gets exciting, because now you're like, okay, Chip, what you gonna do now? What's all right, you did that, let's go. What's the next one, right? And you get on this roll, and before you know it, you look back, you're like, man, that's crazy. I can't believe I did that. So I think for me, maximum effort equals maximum results. Just give maximum effort today.
Love that. Yeah, you build that momentum.
Yes.
That's a strong thing. Well, Chip, thanks for coming on. We'll put all your links in the show notes so people can find you, and have a great rest of the day.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. Go get it.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.